Alpha King's deaf daughter screamed at everyone, until one Omega started signing back. The cold wind cut across the high walls of the Munchido castle, carrying the scent of pine and frost from the forest beyond. Snowflakes swirled like silver dust in the pale light of the moon, settling gently on the spires of the ancient castle. Inside, the halls were dim and heavy, lined with banners of the Alpha King's ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow every guest who walked beneath them. It was a place of power, pride, and for some, fear. Lyra, the Alpha King's daughter, moved through the corridors like a shadow. She was young, yet she carried herself with a strength few could match. Her hair, black as midnight, flowed over her shoulders, and her eyes held a storm no one dared touch. Yet the truth of her life was simple and cruel. She could not hear a single sound. From birth, the world had been silent to her, filled with shapes and light, gestures and glances, but no words. And because of this, she had grown isolated, even within her own home. The nobles whispered behind her back. Servants avoided her gaze. Some pitied her and others treated her as a fragile thing that might shatter at the slightest touch. But Lyra was not fragile. She was fire contained within a fragile shell, and only she knew how much it burned. Tonight, the castle was alive with celebration. It was the annual winter gathering, when neighboring clans came to pay respects, present gifts, and forge alliances with the Munchido pack. The Alpha King's throne room, usually austere and quiet, buzzed with chatter, laughter, and music. Lyra watched from the shadows, her hands curled tightly to control the rising tide of frustration. The nobles moved past her, murmuring in tones she could not hear, smirking, judging, ignoring her. She tried to remain invisible as always. But one careless lord brushed past her, knocking her elbow. "Watch where you stand, girl," he said, and the words, though silent to her, carried the weight of the mockery in the movement of his hand, the mocking curl of his lips. Something inside her snapped. Lyra threw up her hands, and the scream that tore from her throat startled everyone. It was raw, angry, and filled with everything she could not say. Though she could not hear it herself, she knew the sound carried power. The guests froze, servants scattered. The nobles stared at her, some in horror, others in confusion. The Alpha King, tall and regal on his throne, narrowed his eyes. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, a warning that none dared ignore. No one approached her. No one dared. That was until he appeared. Irian, an Omega from the neighboring Ravenclaw clan, was unlike anyone Lyra had ever met. He was calm, composed, and yet there was a curiosity in his gaze that made Lyra's heart clench. He stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Then slowly, deliberately, he began to sign. Lyra froze, staring at him in disbelief. The words flowed through his fingers like water, clear and deliberate. "I understand you. I hear your anger. I see your pain." For the first time, Lyra felt a connection she had never known. Someone had reached across the silence and touched her world, not with pity, not with mockery, but with understanding. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she forgot about the nobles, the cold stone walls, the heavy banners. All that mattered was the boy who could speak to her in silence. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. He did not like this. No one ever disobeyed protocol in his halls, especially not someone from another clan. Yet Lyra did not care. She felt something awaken inside her, a flame she had kept buried for years. And Irian's gaze met hers, steady and unafraid. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Nobles whispered and cast uneasy glances toward Lyra. The king watched silently, his expression unreadable. Lyra's hands twitched with the desire to sign, to speak in the only language she had ever truly known. But she did not. She waited. And in the shadows, Irian waited too, his eyes never leaving hers. Later, Lyra retreated to her private chambers, the warmth of the fire a small comfort against the cold that had settled in her bones. She pressed her hands to the wall, feeling the ancient stones, imagining the voices they might have heard in centuries past. Her father's shadow loomed in the hallway outside. Even in silence, she could feel the weight of his presence. The Alpha King, for all his power and fearsome reputation, had always been distant. He demanded obedience, loyalty, and strength, but he never truly understood her. Irian knocked softly at the door, then slipped inside when she did not respond. His presence was a light in the darkness. "I wanted to make sure you are not alone," he signed, slowly, carefully, as if each movement were a promise. Lyra hesitated, then returned his signs, her fingers trembling. "I am never alone when you are near." A small smile curved Irian's lips. "And I will not leave you," he signed. "No one can take that from us." The firelight danced across their hands as they moved together in silent conversation. Lyra felt her heart beat in a rhythm she had never known, a rhythm shared and understood without a single sound. But even in this brief sanctuary, the world outside waited, harsh and unyielding. The Alpha King did not forget. The next morning, he summoned Irian to the throne room. Lyra's stomach twisted in anxiety. The nobles gathered, whispers spreading like wildfire. The king's voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of command. "Who taught my daughter to communicate in ways I did not authorize?" he demanded. His eyes, sharp as winter ice, fixed on Irian. Irian's hands remained steady, though his heart raced. He signed back slowly and respectfully. "I did not teach her to disobey. I only showed her that someone can understand her." The king's gaze softened slightly, though his voice remained stern. "Understanding is not permission. You do not enter my halls and teach my daughter without my consent." Lyra stepped forward, unafraid. Her hands moved quickly, passionately, signing words she had never dared to speak. "I am not a child to be hidden. I am not weak. I am alive, and I will not be silenced." A murmur passed through the nobles. Some were shocked. Others were impressed. The Alpha King's expression remained unreadable, yet for the first time, Lyra saw a flicker of something in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, of the fire she carried. Irian reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "You are stronger than you know," he signed. Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to shout, to scream, but the words were not necessary. The silence between them was louder than any voice. Later, Lyra wandered the castle's tower, looking out over the snow-covered forest. Her fingers traced the cold stone of the balcony. She thought of Irian, of the fire that had awakened within her, of the connection that defied the rules of kings and nobles. The wind whipped around her, carrying the faint scent of pine and snow, and for the first time she felt powerful in her own silence. And yet, danger lurked beyond the walls. Whispers of rival clans, jealous nobles, and old curses traveled through the corridors like shadows. Lyra's life, though protected within the castle, was not entirely safe, and the bond she had begun with Irian, though precious, could draw unwanted attention. The night deepened, and Lyra returned to her chambers. Irian waited, a silent presence at her side. Their hands found each other again, and the warmth of touch spoke louder than any word. "Tomorrow, everything changes," Irian signed, his eyes locked on hers. Lyra felt a chill, not from the winter air, but from the truth in his words. The world outside the castle was harsh, full of rules she had never followed, dangers she had never faced. Yet, with Irian beside her, the impossible seemed possible. And in the silence of the night, Lyra screamed once more, not in fear, not in anger, but in defiance. The walls of the castle seemed to shake with it, echoing into the dark forest beyond. For the first time, Lyra understood. She was not alone. She had found someone who could speak to her heart, someone who could see the fire inside her. And no one, not even an Alpha King, could take that away. The snow fell silently outside, covering the castle in a blanket of silver. Inside, the young princess and the Omega shared a secret that was stronger than any law, more powerful than any fear, and more dangerous than any curse. A connection that no one could break. And so, the first spark was lit, a spark that would soon grow into a fire that could challenge kings, Break the morning sun spilled pale gold over the snow-covered towers of Munchido Castle. Inside, the halls seemed quieter than usual, though tension simmered beneath the calm surface. Lyra moved carefully through the corridors, her fingers brushing the cold stone walls. She had not slept well. Her mind kept replaying the events of the winter gathering, the way the nobles had stared, whispered, and recoiled when she had screamed, and how Irian had stepped forward, calm and fearless, speaking to her in the only language she had ever truly understood. Her father, the Alpha King, had been watching her closely ever since. His presence was a shadow that followed her, silent and sharp, reminding her that in this castle she could not escape scrutiny. But Lyra had discovered something new, a spark of courage, a quiet fire that refused to be put out. And that fire had a name, Irian. Irian was waiting for her in the library, a place of towering shelves, flickering candlelight, and hidden corners. The smell of old parchment and ink filled the room, comforting and safe. Lyra hesitated at the doorway, unsure if she should enter. But when Irian looked up and smiled, all doubts melted away. He signed slowly, deliberately. "You are here. You came. That is enough for now." Lyra nodded, her fingers moving in response. "I want to learn more. I want to understand the world better." Irian's smile deepened. "Then we begin today." For hours they sat together, fingers moving in delicate, precise motions. He taught her new signs, ways to express feelings, thoughts, and ideas beyond simple gestures. Lyra learned quickly, eager to grasp every nuance. The world she had thought silent began to open in new ways, through touch, sight, and the rhythm of movement. Each lesson was a secret rebellion, a defiance of the walls and rules that had confined her for so long. Outside the library, the castle was alive with whispers. The nobles had noticed Lyra's sudden confidence. Some admired her, though they would never admit it openly. Others were unsettled, uncomfortable with a princess who would not be contained by silence or obedience. Even within her father's council, murmurs of concern reached his ears. The Alpha King, however, was calm. His eyes were sharp, always measuring, always calculating. He had watched his daughter grow up, had seen her rage, her frustrations, and her rare moments of joy. But something had changed. Irian's presence had stirred something in Lyra, something he could not control. And while he respected the boy's courage, he also knew that courage could be dangerous in a world ruled by power and fear. Later that day, Lyra wandered the castle gardens, still covered in a thick layer of snow. The wind cut through her cloak, biting and cold, but she welcomed it. The frost seemed to sharpen her senses, make her feel alive in a way the warm halls could not. She traced the patterns of frozen leaves with her gloved hands, thinking of Irian and their lessons. Each sign she had learned was like a key, opening doors to emotions and thoughts she had never shared before. She did not notice the shadow that followed her until a voice spoke softly, echoing in the empty garden. "Princess Lyra," the voice said, low and cautious. Lyra turned sharply, eyes narrowing. The figure was a servant, one she knew well but never trusted completely. The man bowed quickly. "Forgive me, princess, but there are rumors in the halls. Some nobles, they are uneasy about you and the Omega boy." Lyra's heart tightened, though she did not speak. Instead, she signed. "Do they think I am weak?" The servant hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Finally, he said quietly, "Some fear what they do not understand. Others fear the power you carry." Lyra's fingers trembled. Power. That was what it was. All these years she had felt powerless, trapped by silence and expectation. But now, with Irian's guidance, she felt strength she had never known, and it was dangerous for herself and for him. She returned to the library, the snow crunching under her boots. Irian was waiting, as always, a calm presence in a world that often felt chaotic and cruel. "You look troubled," he signed, tilting his head. "I am," Lyra admitted, fingers moving quickly. "The castle, it watches. They whisper, they do not understand me. Irian reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Let them whisper, let them fear, you do not need their approval, you have me, you have your strength, that is enough. Lyra's chest tightened. He was right. For the first time, she felt a sense of control, a quiet rebellion that belonged only to her. And yet, she knew that this was only the beginning. The castle, her father, and the world beyond its walls would not easily accept a princess who refused to be silent. The next days passed in a tense rhythm. Lyra and Irian met in secret, their lessons growing longer, more complex. They practiced communication, strategy, and even small signs of magic that had been passed down in her family for generations. Each moment was a step toward independence, toward understanding the world and herself. But danger was never far. One evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, a messenger arrived at the castle gates. The Alpha King summoned his council, his expression unreadable. Lyra watched from the shadows, sensing the weight of the moment. The messenger bowed before the king. "My lord, rumors have reached the Ravenclaw clan. They speak of unrest, of plans that may threaten the Munchado pack." The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "Plans?" he demanded, voice cold and commanding. "Explain." The messenger hesitated, then spoke. "They believe the princess has found an ally, one who may shift the balance of power within the kingdom. Some call him dangerous, others extraordinary." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. They spoke of Irian. She clenched her fists, her nails pressing into her palms. Her secret, fragile and precious, was at risk. That night she met Irian in the garden again, under the pale moonlight. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of frost and pine. Lyra's fingers moved rapidly as she signed. "They speak of you, they know, I am afraid." Irian took her hands in his, steadying her trembling fingers. "Then we must be careful," he signed. "But do not fear, we are stronger together. Whatever comes, we face it as one." Lyra nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Together, they were a force that no whisper or shadow could break. But the tension in the castle was growing, and she knew that soon their secret lessons would be discovered. The following day, the Alpha King called Lyra to his study. The room was dim, lit only by candles and the fading winter sunlight. His presence filled the space, commanding and heavy. Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she signed her greeting, but he did not acknowledge it immediately. "Lyra," he said at last, voice steady but sharp, "I hear rumors that you have been meeting with Irian without my permission." Lyra's heart pounded. She signed quickly. "I only wanted to learn. He teaches me. He helps me understand." The king's eyes softened just slightly. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I see the fire in you," he said quietly. "I have always known it was there. But fire can burn both the one who carries it and those around them. Be careful, child." Lyra lowered her hands, absorbing his words. They were a warning, but also a recognition. Her father, for all his power, had finally acknowledged her strength, and it was intoxicating. Later, as the castle settled into the quiet of evening, Lyra and Irian met once more in the hidden tower room. Their hands intertwined, their signs flowing like a dance of shadows and light. They spoke of dreams, of fears, of the world beyond the castle walls. Each word was a promise, each touch a bond. But even in this sanctuary, the world outside pressed close. The whispers of rival clans, jealous nobles, and old grudges filled the air like invisible storms. Lyra knew that soon her strength, her bond with Irian, and the secrets they shared would be tested. As they parted for the night, Irian signed one final message. "Whatever comes, I will be at your side. Trust me as I trust you." Lyra watched him leave, the shadows swallowing his figure. Her heart was full, yet uneasy. The castle walls seemed thicker, the corridors longer, and the winter wind sharper. But she was not afraid, not anymore. She pressed her hands to the cold stone of the tower wall, feeling its strength, its age, its endurance. She thought of her own strength, newly discovered, and the bond that had ignited between her and Irian. The fire in her chest blazed brighter than ever. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the castle gates, the first signs of danger stirred. A rival clan had noticed the princess, the Omega, and the strange power that seemed to bind them. The whispers in the halls would grow louder, the shadows deeper, and soon, Lyra would be forced to confront the world in ways she had never imagined. But tonight, she was not afraid. Tonight, she was free, if only for a moment, and that freedom was a promise of strength, of courage, and of a connection that could change everything. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in white silence. And inside, two hearts beat in unison, silent yet speaking, powerful yet fragile, ready to face whatever the dawn would bring. The moon hung low over the Munchado castle, casting silver light across the snow-laden towers. Inside, the halls were quiet, yet tension thrummed in every corner. Lyra walked alone through the corridors, her cloak brushing the stone floors. Her mind was heavy with thoughts of Irian, the Omega who had shown her a world beyond silence, and of the whispers in the castle, rumors that stretched beyond the walls, carrying shadows she could feel but not see. Since the winter gathering, things had changed. Lyra felt stronger, more alive, yet a new unease had begun to settle within her. The bond with Irian had grown deeper, but so had the weight of expectation and danger. And there was something else, something that had been whispered in fragments by servants and old guards, something that made her blood run cold, the curse of the Munchado bloodline. Her father, the Alpha King, had always been distant, commanding, and strict. Yet he had watched her carefully in the days after the gathering, observing her lessons with Irian. He had not yet spoken of the curse, but Lyra had heard the rumors. The firstborn of the Alpha line, it was said, carried a hidden burden, a silence that could not be broken by ordinary means, a power that could either save or destroy. Lyra reached the library, the place where she and Irian often met. The warm glow of candlelight spilled from the windows, and she saw him there, seated at the table with a stack of parchment and a small, carved box of stones. His presence was calm, yet she sensed that he too felt the tension in the castle. "I thought you might be here," she signed as she approached, her fingers moving quickly. Irian looked up and smiled, though his eyes carried a shadow of worry. "I felt it too," he signed back. "The castle is restless. Something stirs beyond these walls." Lyra's stomach tightened. "The curse, do you think it is true?" she asked, her fingers trembling. Irian's hand hovered over hers. "I do not know," he admitted, "but whatever comes, we will face it together. You are not alone." They spent hours speaking in signs, planning, learning, and sharing secrets. But even in their private world, the shadow of the castle pressed in. Lyra could feel the eyes of the nobles, the servants, and her father's guards on her, sensing the shift in her confidence and the growing closeness with Irian. One evening, as snowflakes drifted against the cold glass of the tower windows, Lyra sat alone, tracing the patterns of frost with her fingers. The castle felt unusually silent, almost too quiet, and then she heard it, or rather she sensed it. A movement in the shadows, deliberate and cautious. Irian appeared, silent as the wind. He took her hands gently, his touch warm against the cold. "Something is coming," he signed, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the windows. "I feel it. You must be careful." Lyra nodded, determination hardening in her chest. "I am ready," she signed. "Whatever comes, I will not be afraid." Days passed, and the unease grew. Whispers from rival clans and discontented nobles became more insistent. The Alpha King, though stoic, summoned Lyra to his study. The room was dim, lit by flickering candles that cast long shadows on the walls. "Lyra," he said, voice calm but firm, "you have changed. I see it in your eyes, in your movements. You are no longer the silent child who hid in the halls. You are stronger, but strength can be dangerous, especially when paired with unfamiliar alliances." Lyra's hands moved quickly, signing her response. "Irian is my friend. He teaches me." He helps me understand the world and I trust him." The Alpha King studied her silently, his sharp eyes searching for any sign of weakness. "Trust is powerful," he said at last. "It can bind or break. Be cautious, child. There are forces at work in this kingdom that do not wish you well." Lyra bowed slightly, understanding the warning. She left the study, her mind spinning. The curse, Irian's presence, and the whispers of danger pressed on her. But beneath it all, a fire burned, a fire that refused to be silenced. That night, she met Irian in the hidden garden. The snow sparkled like diamonds, and the wind carried the faint scent of pine. Their hands met, fingers intertwining, and for a moment the world outside the castle seemed to vanish. "I feel it too," Irian signed, his brow furrowed. "The curse, it may be closer than we think. And the rival clans, they are watching. They know something is changing in you." Lyra's chest tightened. "What do we do?" she signed, urgency in her movements. Irian held her hands firmly. "We prepare, we learn, and we trust in each other. That is our strength." The next morning, Lyra awoke early and made her way to the castle archives. She had decided to learn more about the Munchido curse, to understand what danger it truly held. The archives were vast, filled with scrolls, old books, and parchments that smelled of age and wisdom. Hours passed as she pored over texts, her fingers tracing words she could not hear but could see. Among the dusty scrolls, she found an old journal, written by one of her ancestors. The words were careful, deliberate, speaking of a silence that could trap a firstborn child, unless a chosen ally brought understanding and trust. The curse was not only a test of strength, but also a test of heart. Only through genuine connection could it be broken. Lyra's heart raced. The puzzle pieces were coming together. The bond with Irian was not just comfort, it was essential. He was the key, the one who could help her navigate the silence of her fate, but knowledge brought fear as well as hope. Rival clans, old grudges, and political enemies would see this bond as a threat or a weakness. And the castle itself, which had always seemed like a safe haven, now felt like a cage. That evening, as Lyra and Irian met again, she shared what she had discovered. Her fingers moved quickly, signing words filled with urgency and emotion. "The curse, it is real. I am the firstborn. The silence is not just my gift, it is a trial. Only trust, only you can help me survive it." Irian's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Then we face it together," he signed. "No matter the danger, no matter the fear, we are united." Their bond deepened in those moments, strengthened by shared knowledge and mutual trust. Lyra felt the fire within her burn brighter, more focused. She realized that the curse, though terrifying, was also a chance to grow, to prove herself, and to embrace the strength she had always hidden. But danger was never far. One night, while practicing new signs and strategies in the hidden tower room, Lyra sensed movement in the shadows. Figures approached, cloaked and silent. Her heart pounded. Irian's hand found hers instantly, guiding her to safety. The intruders were rival clan scouts, testing the castle's defenses, curious about the princess and the Omega who had dared to claim influence. Lyra and Irian hid, hearts racing, watching as the scouts moved past, unaware of the fire they had provoked. When the scouts finally left, Lyra exhaled, her chest heaving. "They will return," she signed, a mixture of fear and determination in her fingers. Irian nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then we must be ready. The curse, the rival clans, they will test everything. But together, we are stronger than they know." Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the castle grew. Lyra continued her secret lessons with Irian, learning not only language and communication but also strategy, history, and the subtle ways of power within the castle. Each day she felt herself growing stronger, more capable, more alive. Yet the shadow of the curse loomed, a reminder that her path would not be easy. One evening the Alpha King called her once more to his study. This time his expression was softer yet firm. Lyra, he said, his voice carrying weight, I have watched you. I see your strength. I see your bond with the Omega, and I see the spark that could either save or destroy our pack. Lyra signed quickly. I understand, Father. I will not fail. The king studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Remember, trust is your greatest weapon. Do not let fear guide you. Face what comes with courage and you will prevail. Lyra left the study, a sense of purpose settling in her chest. The curse, the rival clans, the shadows in the halls, none of it would break her. With Irian by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. That night, as snow fell softly outside, Lyra and Irian met in the hidden garden. Their hands met, fingers intertwining, and their signs spoke of courage, trust, and unspoken promises. They were preparing, learning, and strengthening the bond that would be the key to breaking the curse. But in the darkness beyond the castle, unseen eyes watched. The rival clans were not idle. The whispers of jealousy, fear, and old grudges grew louder, and the first true test of Lyra's strength and trust was only days away. As the moon rose high, casting silver light on the snow, Lyra pressed her hands to the cold stone of the garden wall. Her heart burned with determination. She would face the curse. She would protect the castle, and she would not be silent anymore. For the first time, she understood the true meaning of her strength. Not just power or fire, but trust, courage, and the bond that could defy even the darkest shadows. And somewhere in the frozen forest beyond the castle, a rival clan moved silently, unaware that the princess they sought to control was already preparing to rise. The snow lay thick over the Munchido castle, muffling sounds and turning the world outside into a silent white sea. Inside, the castle hummed with quiet tension. Lyra moved through the halls with purpose, her dark hair brushing her shoulders and her eyes focused like a storm behind calm water. Tonight, everything would change. She could feel it in the air, a weight pressing on the stone walls, a chill even the fire could not warm. Irian met her at the hidden tower room as always. His eyes were steady, but his fingers betrayed a flicker of concern. Lyra reached for his hands and their fingers intertwined. Are you ready? She signed, a question heavy with courage and fear. Irian nodded. Always, together, we are stronger than anything that comes. The castle was quiet, almost too quiet. In the shadows beyond the walls, rival clans had gathered, intent on testing the Alpha King's strength and discovering the secret of the princess who could speak without sound. But Lyra no longer felt small or powerless. She had learned, grown, and faced her fear in the lessons she had shared with Irian. The first step was the curse. The ancient scrolls she had studied whispered of silence that could trap a firstborn of the Munchido bloodline unless a bond of trust and understanding was forged. For years, Lyra had lived in a world where words and sounds had no meaning. But now, through Irian, she had found the key: connection, trust, and courage. She held Irian's hands firmly. Tonight the curse ends, she signed, her eyes blazing. Irian's fingers moved over hers like a promise, and we will face it together, no matter what comes. They moved to the central hall, the great chamber where the Alpha King held court. The doors were thrown open, revealing the vast space lined with banners and portraits of ancestors long gone. The nobles and servants watched from the shadows, uneasy at the sight of the princess moving with such purpose. Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised, and began to sign. Her fingers moved like water, precise and confident. She spoke not in words but in gestures filled with meaning, conveying strength, defiance, and courage. Irian mirrored her movements, reinforcing the bond they shared. Together they created a language of fire and light, a silent declaration that the princess was no longer bound by fear. The Alpha King stood at the throne, his eyes sharp and commanding, yet softened by pride. He watched as his daughter, once silent and restrained, claimed her space in the hall. There was a flicker of awe in his gaze. She was no longer just his daughter, she was a force, a presence that demanded recognition. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the doors. Rival clans who had been waiting for a sign of weakness stepped into the hall. Their eyes were cold, calculating. They had come to test, to challenge, to seize control if possible. But the princess of Munchido Castle did not waver. Lyra and Irian moved together, their hands weaving gestures of power and unity. Each motion carried meaning, communicating to everyone present that the bond between them was unbreakable. The rival clans hesitated, sensing that this was no ordinary princess and no ordinary Omega. There was magic in their connection, a force that even the strongest among them could feel. One of the rivals stepped forward, a tall figure cloaked in dark furs. "We have come for the princess," he said, voice loud and demanding. The power of Munchido blood cannot remain in her hands alone. It belongs to the pack, to all who claim it. Lyra's chest tightened, but she did not falter. She signed quickly, her movements sharp and deliberate. The power belongs to those who understand it, who respect it, who are bound by trust, courage, and heart, not to fear or greed. The rival's eyes narrowed. "Words will not protect you," he said, "and silence will not save you." Irian stepped forward, placing a protective hand over Lyra's. "You underestimate her strength," he signed, "and you underestimate what we share. Together we are unstoppable." The rival hesitated, sensing the truth in Irian's words. The other clans shifted, uneasy, realizing that this princess and her Omega were unlike anything they had expected. There was a light in Lyra's eyes, a fire that spoke louder than any threat. Lyra took a deep breath, her fingers moving in a final gesture. "I will face the curse. I will face fear. I will face all who seek to harm this castle or its people, and I will not fail." At that moment, a strange wind swept through the hall, as if the castle itself had heard her declaration. The banners fluttered, the candles flickered, and the air seemed charged with energy. The curse, ancient and unyielding, began to unravel, not through magic alone, but through the bond Lyra had formed with Irian, through trust, courage, and understanding. The rival clans stepped back, realizing that they could not challenge this power. Lyra and Irian stood together, hands clasped, hearts synchronized. The room was silent, save for the whispers of awe from the nobles and servants. Even the Alpha King seemed momentarily stunned by the strength his daughter had claimed. Finally, the tall rival lowered his head, a sign of respect and acknowledgement. "You are stronger than we believed," he admitted. "The princess of Munchido Castle will not be controlled. Her power, her bond, it is hers alone." Lyra's fingers trembled slightly, but she smiled. "And it will be used to protect those I care for and to lead with strength and wisdom," she signed. Irian squeezed her hands, pride and love in his eyes. "You have done it," he signed. "The curse is broken, the strength is yours." The Alpha King stepped forward, his eyes softer now, filled with pride and a new understanding. "Lyra," he said quietly, "you have proven yourself beyond measure. You have faced the curse, the clans, and your own fears. You have grown into the leader I always knew you could be." Lyra bowed slightly, humbled yet proud. "Thank you, Father," she signed. "I could not have done it alone." The Alpha King's gaze shifted to Irian, and for the first time he nodded in approval. "And you," he said, voice steady, "have earned your place here, not just as her companion but as someone who respects, trusts, and strengthens her. That is true power." Irian's shoulders relaxed, a small smile on his face. He and Lyra shared a glance, silent words passing between them that spoke of love, trust, and an unbreakable bond. The rival clans, having witnessed the power and unity of the princess and her Omega, retreated quietly. The castle walls, once shadowed by doubt and tension, now seemed alive with a new energy. Servants and nobles alike watched in awe as Lyra moved with confidence and authority, the fire in her heart reflected in her every gesture. Later, as the night deepened and the snow continued to fall outside, Lyra and Irian stood together on the balcony, overlooking the silent forest. The moonlight bathed them in silver, and the castle below seemed peaceful, protected by their courage and bond. Lyra pressed her hands to Irian, signing softly, "We have faced the darkness and survived. Together we can face anything." Irian nodded, his fingers brushing hers gently. "Together we are stronger than the world," he signed. The wind carried their words across the snow-covered towers, a promise and a declaration. The curse that had threatened Lyra was broken, not through force alone, but through trust, love, and courage. She had grown into her own strength, claiming her place as the Alpha King's daughter and as a leader in her own right. The Alpha King, standing behind them, watched quietly. He had always known that his daughter was strong, but he had never seen her true potential until now. The castle was safe, the rival clans had been reminded of her power, and the curse that had shadowed their bloodline for generations was no more. And yet, even in the calm, Lyra knew that life would continue to challenge her. There would be new threats, new choices, and new lessons, but she was ready. With Irian by her side, she had discovered that silence could be as powerful as words, that trust could overcome fear, and that courage was born not from the absence of danger, but from facing it together. As the snow fell softly around them, Lyra lifted her eyes to the stars. They seemed brighter closer, as if the universe itself had witnessed her triumph. She squeezed Irian's hands, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the promise of the bond they shared. Tonight, the Munchado castle was at peace. The princess who had once screamed in frustration had found her voice, not in sound, but in trust, courage, and love. The shadows that had loomed over her life were gone, replaced by a fire that would never be extinguished. And so, under the silver light of the moon, Lyra and Irian stood together, hands clasped, hearts united, ready to face the future. Whatever came, they would face it together, stronger, braver, and bound by a love that had broken curses and defied the darkness. The castle slept in quiet triumph, and the world beyond, though uncertain, seemed a little brighter. The Alpha King's daughter had claimed her power, and with it, she had claimed her destiny.